Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
Sonoro.
Hi, Tamarindo listeners. Before we start the show today, I have an important reminder. The price for our Encuentro retreat is set to go up February 1st. Encuentro is a restorative retreat for women and non-binary folks designed to inspire connection, empowerment, and self-care. Set in the vibrant and historic city of Puebla, Mexico, this culture-filled experience blends meaningful conversations and mindfulness practices that nurture the mind, body, and soul. Now is your last chance to join us for $2,300, and this includes 4 nights at a top-tier hotel, guided tours, powerful workshops, and wellness activities. Go to tamarindopodcast.com and select Encuentro for all the details. Encuentro is May 2nd through the 6th in Puebla, Mexico. Our guest today is Robyn Moreno, a storyteller, meditation teacher, and practitioner of Curanderismo. And she's also an Emmy-nominated TV host. She's worked tirelessly as a cross-platform storyteller, mentor, and thought leader to stand up, speak out, and highlight stories and issues that matter to Latinas and women of color. We talk about her latest book, Get Rooted, and explore how we can all tap into our ancestral roots to create our own medicine bags and get centered in our ser. Wendy Amara joins me as guest co-host for this episode. Let's hear from Wendy and Robyn now. Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Delsy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos! Let's start the show. Welcome, Robyn, to Tamarindo, and welcome, Wendy, as co-host for this episode. How are you both doing today? I'll start with you, Robyn. I want to know, what is your que pasa? What has your week been like? What's your vibe?
Honestly, pretty good. I'm feeling pretty rooted this week. I was lucky enough to be in Mexico last week, and that was incredibly grounding. And just being in the sand and the sea and the full moon, just being in nature was wonderful. And here I live in the Hudson Valley of New York, so it's a huge difference. There was just a snowstorm, so the listeners can't see, but I'm looking at this just blanket of white. And it's just giving me a lot of peace. And I'm also very excited because I've known of both y'all's work, but we've actually never got to spend any time together. So I'm just really excited for our plática.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I just got back from Mexico. I also feel very rooted. I love going back. Wendy, what is your vibe? How are you doing? ¿Qué pasa?
Yes, I am. Feeling all the emotions, right? It feels like I'm in LA County. We're still dealing with the repercussions of these fires, starting to find out more about what families are really dealing with now on the other side. I feel like our mental health is starting to come to the surface more now in terms of the importance of regulating our nervous system. And I think people are starting to really understand that what we've been through has been traumatizing for many of us. Even if you are fortunate enough to not have been one of the families that lost your home, it was still a traumatizing time because all of us know someone that has either lost their home or was displaced or was evacuated or was without water for 4 days or without electricity. So, and the high winds continue. Mother Nature continues with the same things that caused the fires before. So that's what's heavy on my heart today. But then I'm also super excited because Robyn's book is actually one of the books that I read this past year that I actually physically have, because I don't have that many books anymore, thanks to audiobooks. I listen to everything, but now I actually have that book, and I'm so excited to be speaking with you, Robyn, today and to talk about getting rooted. So I'm also on this high, right, of like excitement and energy to be here and collaborating with you again, Brenda.
Yes, I'm holding the book right now in my hands, Get Rooted. When I needed to consider evacuating, I did kind of self-evacuate just because the fires and the smoke was really, really close and just bad. Your book came with me, Robyn. So I want to talk about this book, Get Rooted. Let's start there. Robyn, tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write the book, the journey that got you to this book.
I feel like anyone who writes a book, it's a long time coming, right? There's a story that's sort of percolating probably for years or forever. And I also think all of us have books in us, right? So I'm excited for all the books that will be brought forth. But this particular book and story, it really, I guess, became pen to paper because I was going through a very, very hard time in my life. I was almost like a spiritual crisis, I guess, looking back at it. My work was incredibly stressful. I was commuting like 4 hours a day. It was just high stress. I wasn't seeing my young children. And I just felt really confused. Like, how did I get here? Like, I felt almost like disembodied. Like, okay, like someone gave me a map a long time ago, and this was one of the things that was supposed to make me happy, doing these things. And yet I don't feel happy. In fact, I feel really confused and far from myself and what is going on. And so I ended up at the same time, because I think, maybe in your subconscious or in your spirit, when you ask for sort of a SOS, like a spiritual SOS, like the ancestors or the universe will in fact answer. And so I had been really emitting a lot of help me signs. Like I need help. I am not doing well. While externally I'm presenting that I have it all together, I'm not. Like this, it's a pure facade, or I'm white knuckling this, and I'm not doing really well at all. So I ended up at similarly as a lot was happening in my life, I started to be reintroduced to a medicine that is, I think, familiar for many of us, practiced by like our grandmothers or, tias, our moms, called Curanderismo. My great grandmother was a practitioner, but it always felt sort of like old fashioned to me or something like antiquated. But it started to come back into my life at this time. And so there was a very distinct moment where I was in Mexico. One of my cousins was having a birthday, a big birthday. So we went there and I was on the beach and I read this really beautiful book by this curandera from Texas named Elena Avila. And the book is called Woman Who Glows in the Dark. And she talks about growing up on the border in El Paso, about being, a Mexican-American, but with curanderismo, right there, like on the border, and how she was a nurse, but she went back to curanderismo. And I read this specific thing that I could read to y'all now, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I just said, this is what I write in my book. So snuggling my feet into the warm sand in front of the rolling blue-green waves, I opened a book and read something that changed my life. The book was Woman Who Glows in the Dark by Elena Avila, a well-known curandera. And there I found the explanation for the never-ending ache I'd sought to fill with over-pleasing and overachieving. It was susto. So though the literal translation of the Spanish word susto, S-U-S-T-O, is freight, the deeper meaning is soul loss. In curanderismo, susto is referred to as a quote-unquote magical freight, similar to a post-traumatic stress disorder. And the idea of susto is that when something traumatic happens to you, a piece of your soul goes into hiding. And the book, Avila describes soul loss as, quote, a state in which we do not feel fully present or as if we're really ourselves. We experience a feeling that something's missing because our spirit, the energetic aura that surrounds us, has been violated. In my culture, our culture, we have always known that the soul can be injured just as deeply as the body, mind, and emotions. And we call this type of wounding susto. And because the soul is sacred and should never be touched, when it's violated by traumatic experiences, it runs and hides, as if it had become frozen in time because of terrible events. And maybe listeners are saying, oh my goodness, this sounds so familiar. And when I read that, I felt very much that like I had some sort of undiagnosed illness that I finally found a name for, that I kept looking for in all of these things or ambitions or I don't even know, like Eastern spiritual practices. And when I read this, I was like, this is it. This is what I have. I have susto. This is what's happening. Something's missing. And so the thing about a soul loss, and so I had the name for it. I had susto of a soul loss. And as I began to read and study, what I realized is that the sort of antidote is that you go on a soul retrieval. You try to retrieve your soul back. You try to figure, I try to figure, where in my life have I left myself? Where did I have to cut parts of myself off? Where did pieces fly away? With life, colonization, the code switching we have as Latinas, whether just honest trauma that I've experienced, I'm sure we all have, unfortunately. And how can I retrieve myself? And so that was the impetus for the book. And so the book is essentially a midlife woman trying to retrieve her soul.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Robyn, because I went through a similar experience, except mine happened on the 405 freeway in LA driving to my job in my 20s, where I had done everything that my immigrant parents had told me to do to create happiness. And I still found myself in a state of what you're calling susto now. I just didn't know what to name it, but I felt overwhelmed. I felt disconnected. I felt like, but I just keep working. It's not equaling more happiness or more joy, or I don't feel centered. I felt discombobulated. And from that came this need to want to do something different, which is how I ended up doing coaching and how I ended up, finding your book eventually and all the other things. I'm interested in this concept of sed. Walk us through, what is this concept of sed? Because I also talk about being work, right? And sed, and who you're being are very much connected. And what this power of sed is in terms of our inner trust. If you could explain it a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's exactly how it was taught to me. So I have a spiritual teacher, maestra, and, I would talk and I would have a lot of self-doubt, I don't know, a lot of things were coming up. And she said, you really need to stay in your ser, in your energy field. And I was like, okay, what is she talking about? And in Spanish, sed, I believe, means to be, but she was talking about this, the way of being, like being, right? And she's like, when you're in your sed, when you're centered and focused, you'll be clear on what you're doing and why. And so sed is one of those things for me where it's almost felt easier than described. And I think it's going to everyone will have their definition of it. But sed for me is almost the opposite of susto, right? It's like that deep inner knowing. It's that inner light. For me, it lives, and people can't see me, but I'm sort of pointing to almost like my gut, you know what I mean? I guess the solar plexus, if that makes sense for people. But that's where I feel it in the body, where it's just this knowing, right? I know what I know. It could be ancestors talking to you. It could be, people can call it intuition. People could be it could be God or inner light. But it's, to me, and I talked to my teacher about it, it's almost like who you were before susto. It's very unbreakable, right? It's unbreakable. And someone explained, I said to someone, they're like, oh, it's like the unstained heart of the child. And I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. So I feel like there's a lot of ways that people can explain it. But for me, it's like your truest knowing. And I think that we all really have this knowing, but susto, society, really, they swirl our compass. So we have a sense, maybe you had that sense on the freeway, this is not the life I'm meant to live. I know that my immigrant parents are so well-intentioned. They work so hard. They're well-intentioned, but the life they want for me does not match the life I want for me, right? And so I have to follow my ser and make my own map. And maybe I'm going to make my own mistakes. I probably will. I'm going to fall on my face. The world is unfortunately going to probably kick me in the teeth, but I have to make my own way with others. And I think that is sort of what ser is. I have to also keep coming back to it. I think that society, things that happen in the world, these devastating fires, just anything can make us fly again. And we're oh, so how do we get back to it? And I think that's one of the many reasons I called the book Get Rooted. And it should have been called rooting, because rooting is something that we do again and again. It's not a one and done kind of state.
Love it. And it's so fitting because the first time I was introduced to your work was at Raizado Fest, right? Which is such a great name for this idea of staying rooted and connected to our roots, but making it an active verb, something that we continue doing. Well, we're at a time that is really, really scary right now. Talk about discombobulated, talk about swirling things around us beyond the fires in California. We're entering a really scary era as a country. I think the whole country can use a limpia. I want to know how can the practices in your book right now be helpful as we grapple this new era of uncertainty?
I think, yes. So that is real. That is real. Right? We have to deal with sort of reality. And I feel like there's I opened the book with this saying in Nahuatl. And it says, it's slippery, it's slick on earth, right? It is slippery and it's slick on earth. The world is slippery, slick. And this is a saying, as I understand, that the Mexica, who we know as the Aztecs, would say. This was like a common saying. Like grandmothers would maybe tell it to their kids. Like it was sort of like, and what they would say is like, look out, mija, like the world is the terrain is it's not steady. You go this way and you can fall. You go this way. So, how do you stay rooted? And from what I've learned in Aztec philosophy, they are ancient ancestors. So this is the state of the world. The world is slippery, slick, right? Which is, it doesn't sound so fun, but to me, it makes sense because the reality is we want to like always get the ground underneath our feet. That's a big Buddhist concept, right? The groundlessness. You're trying to get, but how can you root? I think things like this happen. You can do all the things and certain people can come into power with all of their ideas, like where do you have agency and, whatever. And so the Mexica also had an antidote, like, how do you walk on this slippery, slick life? And there was this word, it's Nahuatl, called, and forgive my Nahuatl because I'm not a native Nahuatl speaker, but it's Neltelitzli, and it means to be well-rooted, right? And so how do we walk the slippery, slick path? We try to root, we live a life that is well-rooted. And so what does that mean? And it's going to mean different things for everybody. Right? Like what's going to root you? Like, how are you? I guess I'll ask y'all, like, how are y'all staying rooted in this time of uncertainty and fear? We're not sure how things are going to play out. Like, Brenda, Wendy, what are y'all doing to stay rooted?
To me, it's continuing to have these fabulous conversations through this podcast is one way that I stay rooted because it's a way for me to build community with people beyond right my inner circle, right? There's a whole community and audience that we can relate in that all of us feeling this anxiety and this desire to learn and act. That's how I stay rooted is being in community and growing community.
Yeah, for me, it's very similar in that I have my clients who, even though I'm pouring into them, they really pour into me also in just practicing the work. So all of the women that I coach keep rooting me. Like there's no other choice but to stay rooted in the work that I do. So whenever I'm in a room with amazing women like you guys, I can feel there's this energy or this vortex that opens up that then gets me back like, oh yeah, I'm on the ground. Here's where I'm at. And that feeling, recenters me. I also spend time in silence and meditate and spend time alone. In fact, I have found that the more quote unquote success or business, goals start to happen, the more time alone I need, the more centered time where it's just me by myself, maybe with a journal, sometimes meditating. That also helps me to stay rooted. Oftentimes in nature, just going out and putting my feet on the grass, right, in my backyard. Ooh, or just sitting, watching a tree move. The leaves on a tree move is very centering for me. So those are all ways in which I stay rooted also.
And, it's interesting because they really align and they're all accessible, right? These are all accessible things. You don't have to go out and buy something. You don't have to go out and change something. This is something like being in community, being in nature, being in communion with spirit or self, right? These are very accessible things that everyone can do. There's this professor that I like a lot. His name's Dr. Sebastian Purcell, and he is an Aztec philosophy professor. And he says that the Mexica had four ways, had many ways, but that they had four common ways that they rooted. The first one was embodiment, right? To be in the body, whether that's movement or dancing. And we know this, right? Science tells us that exercise, like move a muscle, change a thought, like it makes us feel better. I also dancing is joyous, right? It's just like it brings the joy and the movement, move the winds of the body, right? I also think that when I get really stressed, I'm in my head. Like a lot of fear for me lives like kind of like above, like I'm very heady. I think a lot. I ruminate a lot. It's all like up here. It's part of my susto dissociation. And so for me, really like breathing, really like connecting, like you were saying, feeling your feet on the ground, doing embodiment practices, if it's a body scan where I'm like, okay, I'm here. Like anytime I get fly away in fear, I sort of come back and like, where am I? Okay, guess what? You know what? You're actually washing dishes right now. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm washing dishes. I'm not like in a fight because in my head I'm in a fight. They're like, okay, no, actually you're actually washing dishes. Okay, just wash the dish. Oh, the water's warm. Okay, what am I doing? I'm going to dry the dish. Oh, someone else needs something. And it's sort of like the next right things keeps me sort of in the moment, in the body. And then the fear sort of dissipates a bit. The second way that this professor said was a balance, to be in balance. And that's hard. I don't know that we always can have balance, but it's something we can sort of strive for, I guess. But it's a balance, what they would call between the face, which is like your judgment, and your heart. So how can you balance the passions and also your reason, right? Like, don't get too overstimulated or over angry, but like angry enough, sacred rage. But how can we also have like some reason? How can we have some self-care? And so that was the balance for me. To me, I think of this as a phrase, over and out. Anytime I'm overwhelmed, I almost need to kind of move it out of the body. So I do it with limpia. I do a lot of limpia practice. Like I do a lot of like cleansings. I was just in a baño. Like I stand in the wind and let the winds move through me. And I just exhale the breath. We always have access to breath, right? That's the cleansing tool that we always have is our breath. We can inhale deeply and extend that exhale, right? Which immediately, it kicks in that rest and digest. And journaling, writing, talking, something like get it out. Sometimes when we have plática, it's a cleansing because we just need to unburden ourselves. Like comadres, I'm scared. Like I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't have the answers, but I'm going to just tell you, I'm frightened. Like I'm in terror. I don't feel good right now. And just, sharing that burden, it really does. Like they say it's a heart straightening talk, pláticas. Because it kind of straightens the heart back. It puts it a little back in place. The third path to rootedness that's put forth by this Dr. Purcell is community. And this one I like y'all. I go deep into because I used to do everything alone. I had this idea, maybe it's a susto response. I think it's a susto response. I think when I was a kid, I had trauma and I was like, I have to do everything myself. And I don't think I made that up. I did. I had to figure my shit out. I had to get myself to school. I had to get myself to New York. Like we know how to work hard as Latinas. Like we hustle, we know how to get it done. But do we know how to rest? Do we know how to ask for help? Do we know how to listen? Do we know how to share our stories? Do we know how to share our troubles? That was the giant frontier for me because I wanted so much to have this facade that I didn't dare let anyone know how much I was struggling, how sad I was, how anxious I was, how much I did not have it together. And the good news is y'all are brilliant. There's other people that have brilliant ideas. I don't have all the brilliant ideas. I'm smart, but I just don't, and I'm not supposed to. So if y'all can help me, like, let myself be helped. Like, let us help each other. Like, that is a deep act of bravery. So I love community. I'm like, I don't want to do anything alone. I was saying this to Brenda when we first started. Like, most of my projects now are in collaborations, which means to co-labor. Let's do it together. And the last one I'll share is is connecting with Teot. Teot means energy, but spirit with poetry, art, writing, anything that sort of brings you to creation, creator, nature, definitely nature. I'm a giant nature person. I live in the country and I need nature. We need nature. It's an integral part of who I am. And so that's some ways that I can offer, but I think it's up to all of us, and that's our work to decide what roots us and also what unroots us, and what people, places, and things do we need to separate ourselves. If we work so hard to get rooted, it does not make any sense to keep, going to a place, person, or thing that instantly unroots us.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 40% off select styles, plus a free professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Yes, thank you so much for reminding us of what unroots us also. As you were talking about, especially family dynamics and us being taught not to necessarily share, right? I remember my parents sharing this saying, la ropa sucia se lava en la casa, right? Which is essentially that your dirty clothes you wash in your house. So that you don't share your problems out in society, right? We keep it in the house. And when you're out in society, you're just working hard, making money, trying to create stability, because I think that was so important for immigrant parents and immigrants to this country, right? Stability, security. So in terms of how we balance with family and dealing with family, a theme in your book that I think many listeners can relate to, and I certainly can, is the weight that we carry due to the concern we have for our family members that don't oftentimes see things the way we do. And we're taught the importance of being in family. But what advice do you have for folks who are carrying this weight and how they can actually take care of themselves? Maybe part of that balance that you were talking about, where we need to take care of ourselves and take care of our family.
Well, so this question alone could be like a series, right? Because it just is like the family dynamics, I would say specifically, I could speak to within, Latine culture, right? And I can only speak to my personal experience, but very much like you, nothing leaves, secrets stay in this family, right? We don't talk about it. This is my family. We don't talk about things. We don't talk about anything, right? But I used to work at this organization and our motto was, you can't be what you can't see, right? And I always loved that. So like if you how are you going to be the Supreme Court justice if you couldn't see one, like Sonia Sotomayor, right? So the importance of standing up and going for your dreams is that you inspire all these people. But I also was like, you know what? That's beautiful. At the same time, we also cannot change what we won't acknowledge, right? How can we possibly change anything if we won't even dare say we have this thing, right? And so I had to start with myself, right? Where I was like, I'm having a lot of trouble with, I'm in recovery. So I used to have a problem with drinking. I used to just, frankly, it was, for me, it was something I had trouble controlling. And I could never really share that with people because I was ashamed. I didn't know if people would understand. And I couldn't change it if I didn't really acknowledge it, right? I had to acknowledge that. So that's one thing. So that we come, right, like all of our family dynamics. And there's a reason we have these things. We come from colonized histories, right? So there's a reasons we had to be quiet. There's a reasons we had to keep shit to ourselves. It could be dangerous. We could be killed for being too loud or saying things like, it's like trauma passed off as culture. We begin to think this is how it is, but this is actually a trauma response. Right. For me, like over drinking and stuffing shit down is not, being Latina. That's actually trauma response. I have I love my family deeply, and I have a lot of people that have a lot of opinions, and they're very loud. And what I found, and it was a hard reckoning, is that some of the harshest words came from inside the house. Right. And that was a sad awakening for me. Like, that real deep realization was like, some of those harshest voices in my mind that prevented me from doing things were actually uttered by people that love me or claim to love me. And that was really hard. Right. And I believe they said what they said for whatever reason, but I didn't always have to accept that. And so having to like decondition and realize, like, there's this idea of like someone's going to send you an arrow, and, how can we remove these arrows that people send us, whether it's like, with well intentions or not. And so I had to really be like, yes, we're family, and yet I don't feel really good around you. And having to speak up, and like, we're supposed to be doing this, but I don't think that's entirely healthy for us to never talk about the most obvious thing, Like, I don't think, and so having to like stand up and sit with that lack of that fear, the deep fear of I'm not going to belong. Writing a book like this, which was incredibly personal and also touches on family, was so scary. I was so scared. I was like, this is really scary. And at the same time, a part of my ser was like, you have your truth. I don't have to go into anyone else's truth. I don't have to tell anyone else's stories, right? They have their right to anonymity. They have that right. They have the right to not tell their stories. They have the right to live the way they want to live. They have that right. I'm not going to tell people what to do, but I have a right to live the way I want to live. I have the right to speak what is true to me. And so it was like that discernment. And that was very empowering to be able to have like boundaries. It's actually like boundaries that I don't think I grew up with, like just fundamental boundaries, to be honest with you. I will say this last thing is I also have a lot of people very close to me that struggle with addictions and mental health issues. And I'm not alone in this. I know I'm not alone. And that is excruciating. That is excruciating to bear witness to people that really incredibly struggle. And that and there's not one brilliant answer for this. I'm afraid everyone has their path. But what I've realized is that, and I have this line in my book, and I could like share it with you guys, but it's basically like, it basically goes something like, curanderismo, the root word of cura means to cure, right? Like cura, cure. And that always like that definition terrified me, because I'm like, I can't cure anybody. But I found this other definition of cura, which means to care for. And I was like, okay, that I can do. I can care. I cannot fix anyone. I don't have that power, right? That's kind of up to them in spirit and whatever, but I can care for them and show up in a way that makes sense to me. And I have this line that said, like, when I used to think that I would get overwhelmed by the messes in my life, but if I just realizing that instead of trying to fix people, which I used to try to do, that was my susto response. And it's hard not to. If I could just show up and care for them, then maybe the caring would be the cure, right? And so for people that out there that struggle with people that are struggling, and it's hard. That's a very hard distinction. And I show up in ways that I can. It's almost like the serenity prayer. Like God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I come back to that a lot.
I'd like to know, how can we all begin to build our own individual medicine bags? This is something else that you reference in the book. So what are some of the steps that we could take to make our own medicine bags?
It goes a little bit back to like what roots you, right? And so I think especially as we're moving into these very slippery, slick times, right? Where we're not certain, like there's a lot of global uncertainty, right? There's just right. And there's a lot of national uncertainty, and it like makes us anxious, right? And so I see a lot of people that walk the medicine path, like healers, or really anybody, right? And they actually carry like medicine bundles, right? And so they'll have a medicine bundle and it'll be like a beautiful red cloth and they almost can make an altar. They have little tools, right? Like what are my tools? And so it's almost like our spiritual toolkit. Like what is going to be our spiritual toolkit for the next 4 years or for the rest of our lives? And the tools will change, right? The tools that we need are going to change. And so I just invite people to figure out like we need to root ourselves constantly, ourselves almost kind of like first, right? There's this concept of 52% in my book. Basically the Mexico are these like master like numerologists. And so they would always have these equations that would equal like, I don't know, 100. Like the, equation to happiness is this much this and this much nature and this much community and this much, prayer. But 52 was always the biggest component of this equation, right? The number 52 is big because the Maya and Mexica's calendar synced every 52 years. So it's almost like a generation, like a century. And so my teacher was always like, don't forget your 52%. And what she meant is 52% of your energy needs to go to you, right? And it's not 75, it's not 100, right? We live in the world. I have children, we have like parents and community to care for, but we can't lose ourselves. We can't lose where are we, right? Like Brenda, where are you? Wendy, where are you? Whoever's listening, where are you? You can't lose yourself because you can't give what you do not have. And so as we build our medicine bags, we have to center like, what do we need? Like, what do I need today to take care of mine, right? So I could be of service to the world. I need water. I need to stay hydrated. Okay. I need to have platicas with my comadres. I need to have coffee because this connects me. This makes me feel that people have my back. I feel heard. I have this. I need to move my body. I need to move my body because I just kind of get all of that energy out. Maybe I'm going to go get a limpia. I mean, I need to talk to my plant. I need to have really good food. I need to rest. I need to do nothing. I need to cancel everything. I need to cancel all the plans. I'm going to rest. But whatever is in your spiritual toolkit, in your medicine bag, it's with you. You carry this with you, right? And you carry this with you everywhere you go. A lot of times I used to leave parts of myself, that's part of that fragmentation, at different doors, right? In this conversation, I'd leave a piece of me over there. At work, in corporate settings, I was going to leave a piece of myself over there. And I try not to do that anymore. I try to bring the totality of myself, good, bad, imperfect, messy, there, and access my breath, access like my body, access the spirit of my ancestors, access maybe like an oil that I constantly have in my bags because I'm very like sensory. And you keep adding to that and you keep adding it again and again, and you dip into it, you share your bag, it grows, you give it to someone, and it's like we're all walking this beautiful path together.
I love that.
So, may our medicine bags grow together.
Yes, I love that. You've given us so many ideas of what we might want to try for our medicine bag. And of course, the permission to know what's going to work for us individually and to remind ourselves to not forget, 52%, right? Like make sure that we're filling our tank so that we can be those caregivers for others. Well, thank you so much, Robyn. This has been so wonderful. And I'm going to invite both Wendy and Robyn, both of you, to join me for our closeout segment. So the first thing we do is we think about what's one thing that we're celebrating, and it could be big, it could be small. What is getting your matraca is what we say. So I'll start with you, Robyn. What is one thing you're celebrating?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I think I'm celebrating being here with y'all. Like, this is so cool. Like, I've been admirers of you both from afar for a long time. So I'm really happy that spirit, like whatever brought us together. I'm really celebrating just this plática and getting to know y'all.
Love that. Love that. Wendy, what is one thing you're celebrating?
This morning, I woke up thinking about this experience that I'm about to go into called the collective quantum leap. It was going to be a challenge. And then I felt like there's so much going on in the world right now with the fires and the elections and all that. I was like, let's just call it a collective quantum leap, which is something I'm doing for my students, but also it's open to anyone who wants to sign up. We're going to use the element of water for 5 days to really connect with the said, what Robyn was talking about, the being part of us, right? And we're going to use that as the element to practice and take action on our goals for 2025. So I'm excited that we're still in January. Yay! We're still at the beginning of the year, which means there's so much hope and possibility for what we can create this year. And I'm excited to get everybody connected to their ser, connected to who they're being, and get rooted so that we can actually achieve our goals this year. That's what I'm most excited about. Yeah.
Love it. Well, in addition to this magical time that we spent together as something that I'm celebrating, just something that's recently on my mind has been AOC going live and just talking to all of us that are just feeling so distraught with this new administration, and just setting the tone for us to stay fired up and to not let us let you know, when we give up, when we turn into cynicism, that's when the other side wins. So if you all need to be pumped up, if you all want to be re-energized, I invite you to go check that out. I also find that I follow Elizabeth Warren, and she's also helped me stay grounded in the way that she's been talking about this time. And just remember that you're not alone. We're all here, and we need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. Robyn just gave us a bunch of tools that we can use when we take care of ourselves, but to stay engaged and to stay connected, it's finding that balance of doing both. Okay, so separate from, so totally opposite of this, what is one thing you're going to throw in la basura, that you're canceling, that you're done with, that you're leaving behind? Robyn, what goes in la basura for you?
It's funny. It's this idea of what I should be doing versus what I want to do. So it's getting back to those voices that we talk about, right? I don't know if it's Sustor society, but I often, and maybe your listeners can relate, I pretty, in my said, I have a lot of clarity about what I want to be doing. And a lot of it is art and writing and just joy. And like Wendy was saying, we're still in January. Like, this is dream time. And I love that she talked about water. I've been feeling so watery, like swimming in creativity, swimming, just nothing even really solid, just kind of just moving. And so yeah, this idea of just that versus this voice that tells me I should be doing something different. Like, you should be doing more. You should be making resolutions. You should be da-da-da. Like, I don't know. And I'm like, who are you? Go away. So that's what I'm canceling. Mm-hmm. Some random voice in my head that's constantly narrating what second guessing myself.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Wendy, what goes in la basura for you?
I think what I'm putting in the basura is something Robyn shared earlier about having to separate ourselves sometimes when we go into like boardrooms or for me, if I'm doing like a speech or if I'm doing a podcast interview or whatever, feeling like, okay, now I got to put podcaster Wendy's hat on, or now I got to put coach Wendy's hat on, or now I got to put mom Wendy's hat on, right? I think I'm just going to be Wendy and be the same Wendy in all the rooms, whether it's mom or CEO or coach or whatever it is. So I'm throwing in the basura this idea that I still have to separate myself. How about I just bring all of me to all the different aspects of me? And I show up, messy, because that's how I am all the time. Like, whether I'm with my husband or family, or if I'm in business mode, whatever, it's all messy Wendy. So messy Wendy just shows up for everything, giving myself full permission, I think, to show up that way.
Okay, I love it. Messy Wendy. Okay.
I love messy Wendy. Messy Robyn. We can play.
Messy Robyn, messy Wendy, messy Brenda. Well, okay, for me, what goes in la basura, what's just been on my mind is that negative self-talk. I think I've been experiencing a little bit of that lately. Lots of negative self-talk, mostly around body image, and I just want to say hush, So hush to the negative self-talk. Okay. And then lastly, what is something that's inspiring you this week? It could be a book, a movie, a practice, whatever is bringing you some inspiration. Robyn, what's inspiring you this week?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I have so many things. So Cecile Richards died this week, and I don't know if y'all know who she is, yes, but she was the president of Planned Parenthood for a long time, and she was the daughter of Ann Richards, who was the last Democratic and female governor Texas has had, which was 30 years ago. And so she died on Monday, the same day that we celebrated MLK Day. And she wrote this book called Make Trouble. And I was just reading it. And it was just this idea of just like making trouble. It's like John Lewis, right? Like John Lewis, the civil rights activist who was like, let's make, he talked about, he saw this injustice. He saw this, like, he calls it the bitter fruits of racism. And he would ask his family, like, why? And they would be like, that's just the way it is. And he's like, and they'd be like, don't get in the way. Don't make trouble. And he'd be like, no, we need to make good trouble, necessary trouble. And so I just love that idea of making trouble, making good trouble. And I feel like I saw it yesterday. There was the administration, I think on maybe their first or second day, went to a church to do service, and a female, I don't know if she would call herself a priest or a pastor, I don't know quite the right words, but she really, really impassioned, and I think quite bravely, had a message for this new administration about mercy and kindness. To extend that, and like how that's the spirit of spirit, is mercy and kindness. And she said this thing like, there's a lot of people that are scared, there's a lot of people. And so let us have this idea of mercy, and just sense, like heart, like where is your heart in this, and like, let's go back to our hearts. And so I felt like that was incredibly brave of her. And I felt then it was a beautiful message as she was standing there with like this line of, these like power. She was speaking essentially truth to power. And I found that so, like, her voice was so clear, and it was so rooted in her message of mercy and love and deep compassion for all of our fellows, right? So I thought that was really beautiful. And I'll say this last thing, just because it's on my mind. I have a lot of inspiration this week, and I need it, obviously, which is that my youngest daughter is going to be in a play on Friday. She's going to be in a musical, and she never usually does that kind of thing. She's kind of like the sporty girl, and it's her second like performance. And it's not dissimilar to this idea of like standing up and taking space and being fully expressed and having joy and fun. And maybe, I think she's nervous, obviously, but like she's going to do it anyway. And I just feel like that's I'm so inspired by her. Like, I'm so inspired by these acts of, of like beautiful humans standing up to be fully self-expressed in all their truth, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Amen. I would say that I will copy your homework and say that I definitely felt inspired by that priest. And hopefully if anybody finds themselves in a room like that, to tap into that courage and to speak out the way she did. It is incredibly brave, because we're dealing with somebody that is just completely unhinged. So it takes a lot of courage, and I'm so glad that she did, and that so many of us are inspired by her actions. Wendy, what is your inspiration for the week?
Yeah, I've been inspired by the amount of artists, community activists, and healers that have shown up in so many ways for what's happened here in LA County with the fires. But also, at the same time as the fires were happening in LA, in the Central Valley in California, there was a huge ICE presence in terms of immigrants being stopped just because, right? And then they started showing up out here in LA also, immigration officers. So this idea and fear of this deportation, how it's showing up. And what I am always in awe of, and yet at the same time, like, of course, is how the community shows up. Like, instead of majority of the community kind of, hiding out, all of us that are here legally showed up in the streets and protested, started, activating our community, started actually showing up and speaking what we really feel is right for our community. So the courage that it takes to do that at a time when people are struggling, as you guys are saying, because of what's happening energetically on the planet, right? What's happening energetically. It's always so inspiring to see people show up in a powerful way. The artists, the activists, right? The educators, the healers. There's lists and lists of people offering their medicine, offering their free time, being of service in some way or another. So I'm inspired by the way people in LA have shown up for each other, but also people all over the state in terms of what we're feeling, what we're seeing with these deportations, what we're seeing in terms of fear, the way the community has shown up for each other to really support each other. And it's just so hopeful. It's so hopeful, right? It gives us such hope of the goodness in humanity. Like, even though the darkness becomes obvious, the light also becomes obvious during these really tough times.
Love that. Well, with that, we're going to end our conversation today. Robyn, it was such a pleasure to spend time with you. Wendy, always great to collaborate with you. And we look forward to hopefully meeting in person sometime in the future. All right. Cuídate, ponte un suéter is what I say as my sign off here. Ciao. Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delsy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Jeff Ricards wrote our theme song. Sonoro Media's Karina Riveroll provides production support, and Cliva Torres edits our episodes for YouTube. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.